Morning, Emmett. How you doing?
Good, good. How are you? You right?
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Sorry, just gremlins again. So we just had a little tech gremlins this morning, guys. Apologies, a couple of minutes. We were ready and fired up, but I had a couple of gremlins. So hopefully they can iron themselves out, and you guys are there. We can see a few people in the waiting room already. That's good stuff. Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Growth Show. It's been a while, I think we can say that. But obviously, as you know, this is our weekly show that we kind of tackle some of the issues out there at the moment in the business world and kind of get our take on it. So just while we kind of wait, I can see people coming in now. How's your week been? All good?
Yeah, very good. Well, I guess so. I mean, like, I think if anyone's got any interest in the equity markets and in crypto, then maybe not such a good week.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
aside from that, it's been very good. Yeah, interesting times. I mean, we'll go into that in a second. Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, good actually. Yeah, there's in this part of the world, there's been Eid obviously and Ramadan, so all of that always kind of plays tricks from a business perspective. You never know if it's going to be a rock star or kind of mediocre as far as business, but it's been good actually. So I think there's been less of an impact over the years of that particular holiday or religious month, and then obviously the Eid break as well. So it's good to be back and good to kind of see the roads busy again. That's always our test, right?
Yeah, there's a lot going on here at the moment.
Yes,
so there's a lot of people around. So
a lot of news, a lot of local stuff, a lot of kind of eyes on Dubai again, which is good. And we got this week is Arabian travel market. So that was always a traditionally huge event. That obviously because Dubai specifically is very tourist focused, or kind of like getting tourists and businesses here. That's a big deal as well. So that's going on this week.
Excellent.
Perfect, good stuff. So look, I think what we'll do, guys, is just by way of a reminder, we have the show every week. We've had a bit of a hiatus. I think the last time you would have seen us was myself and Amit, like a couple of giggling school kids. We're in the States, all around kind of Web3, crypto, NFTs, metaverse.
Yeah.
And obviously we've had a pretty deep dive into that last couple of months. So we're excited about today's show. And we'll obviously take a deep dive in that. But just while we're waiting for a few more people, I mean, you alluded to it at the top there. There's a lot of red, right? At the moment, anyone that's sitting there with kind of, that typical 4 screens in front of them, there's a lot of red and there's a lot of downward arrows, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think and again, I think, it's very kind of related to, I think, our topic today, sort of less so the equity markets, but certainly crypto.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously this morning, I think there's been, a bit more of a kind of bloodbath. I think it's a bloodbath already, so I don't know what an extended version of that looks like. But I mean, ultimately, I think Bitcoin was down to about $27,000.
Yeah.
Ethereum was down to $1,800. So really kind of drastic drops. I mean, we're talking about, 10, 15, 20% drops in not much time. But really interesting because I mean, it's I think the kind of narrative around some of these, some of these kind of alternative sort of currencies or asset classes was that it was more kind of seen as a potential safe haven.
Yeah, they're not impacted.
Right.
Yeah, as much.
So, yeah, exactly.
Similar to the kind of gold.
Yeah. And it's not just, and it's just not playing out like that. Yeah. And I think there's good reason. I think there's a real, I think there's obviously a lot of kind of institutional investment now in this as well. So, be quite easy to just cash in on some of these kind of liquid assets there. But I think really interesting. And I think it's like I said, very sort of connected to our topic. So something that we'll touch upon. I mean, it's not obviously focused on what we really want to kind of run through today, but definitely some sort of crossover.
Well, it still has an impact because it's a fuel for a lot of what we're going to be talking about, right?
Yeah. And I mean, look, and I also think, I mean, the reality of this is, and I don't know if you see it this way, but it's quite funny. I think the people who are kind of not involved in this space, I've got some very smug friends this morning, for example, who are like, "Oh, this is just all a fad. This is it's for money launderers and it's for this."
Yeah.
You don't really kind of understand actually why these things were created. And they're just obviously sitting there going, "I told you," right?
Yeah.
And it's but ultimately, you've still got a lot of people that bought Bitcoin for a few dollars, saying actually it's bad,
which is fine,
but it's not really bad.
And we've been here before.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, when it dropped from $19 down to $4,000,
exactly,
right? In the space of a few weeks.
Yeah.
You know, again, if you'd have bought then, you're still
all
looking
right.
at this quite handsomely, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the key to all of this is really kind of, you know, taking the short-term lens off of it, looking at things, looking at the fundamentals behind it, looking at the reasons for why it exists, and then saying, okay, look, yes or no, does this kind of seem like an interesting sort of way to, you know, diversify
portfolios out there, yeah.
And then I guess the other sort of topic that's been interesting, been hovering around last few weeks, that seems to be kind of coming to some sort of conclusion now, is the Elon Musk and Twitter takeover. So yeah, I wanted to see what your kind of initial thoughts on that were. Actually,
it's quite amusing how it plays out, you know, from a tweet, you know, a poll basically.
Right.
The consequences will be, you know, will be noted, as it were. So I think it's interesting how it's played out. I think you and I have our own kind of personal reasons why we think, you know, it's kind of happened.
Yeah.
And I think again, you almost have to be involved in this space to understand why you'd even consider Twitter. I mean, I think what's interesting, especially in this part of the world, in the Middle East, is, except for Saudi, Twitter's kind of fallen out of favor. It's one of those ones that no clients really kind of talk to you about or have a conversation about. It's not really on their radar. Whereas obviously in the kind of Web3 space, it's you know, it's first and foremost. I mean, my personal usage of Twitter has gone through the roof in the last couple of months. I think yours as well.
Yeah.
You know, to the neglect of some other platforms. So I think it's interesting. I think it's just interesting in the sense that perhaps, you know, some individuals don't really understand why that, and obviously we'll dig into a bit why I think we've done that. I think it's a bold move. I think it's a good move, and we'll see if what comes to fruition from it, really.
Yeah.
From a, you know, ultimately opening up the platform. He's talking about opening up the algorithm, you know, changing the dynamics of the advertising revenue and how, you know, pay to play is in there. So it's interesting.
Yeah, look, I think I mean, nothing that Musk does isn't calculated, right?
No, it's not. He didn't wake up and go, "Let's do this."
No,
it's not
exactly.
a win.
And I think there's, you know, there's definitely. I think we'll talk a little bit more about Twitter for sure. But I think I think from the early signs, again, you know, he kind of does look at the future. You know, and he's very much looked at this from a kind of Web3 perspective. Even last week, he's obviously put all of his Bored Ape NFTs up there, and it's really interesting. I think the point is, I think he's heavily sort of ingrained, not just in terms of what the web looks like now, but, you know, what the web looks like tomorrow. His background is tech, right? I mean,
yes.
And it's, you know, from PayPal, right?
Yeah.
So
people forget that. I think.
People do, yeah. So you kind of look at, okay, look, he's obviously, you know, Tesla and SpaceX and some of the other kind of ventures now, but the reality is this is very much an online, you know, kind of internet, you know, 1/2 play. You know,
yes.
He's been in that space a long time, made his initial money from that.
Mm.
So cool. I think, should we move on, Andrew?
Yeah, definitely.
I think, so look, guys, we wanted to, like Andrew said, we've been really kind of heavily ingrained within this web 3.0 space, I guess, for the last, well, many months now. And really kind of looking at not just kind of what's out there now, but also, you know, what does the future look like? How does it kind of challenge what we kind of, you know, how we kind of operate right now? I think, you know, I guess our responsibility to our clients is to almost kind of help them to understand what they should do next.
Yeah.
And so this very much kind of falls.
Should they even be involved?
Yeah, falls very much in line with, you know, what we would typically do. And I think what's become more interesting on the back of this is the deeper that we've got ingrained within this movement. I'll call it a movement for now. I think it's much more than that. I think the deeper we've kind of got more involved in that, I think the more our eyes have opened in terms of, okay, well, actually this does potentially threaten what we kind of know today, right?
Our core business.
Yeah, and what we sort of take for granted today. I think let's call it that, right? Like you said, you know, when we're having conversations from a social media perspective with clients, you know, it is very much a case of, okay, guys, we want to look at maybe Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, and you know, and whatever else, right? But they don't really talk about Twitter, and yet this new movement, I think, heavily involves Twitter, for example, right? And I think it's just things like that I think we need to kind of really, I think, explain. Try to kind of understand why these challenges are real. Okay. And again, I think I just urge everyone to kind of, you know, not necessarily keep your sort of short-term hats on, but just try and understand that there is something very real that's happening at the moment. And
it's happening at a fast pace.
And it's happening at an incredible pace. I mean, I keep reading on, you know, different communities that I'm on, where the community is like, okay, cool, you know, we've done this and we've done this and we've done this. And at the moment, they're like, guys, we just have to remember that the corporations that we're working with don't work as fast as Web3. Right?
Yeah.
You know, so there's so much about that's going on.
Exactly.
Saying, hey, this industry is moving incredibly fast. We're getting so much done in a matter of days. But we're still working with traditional organizations. It takes a bit of time. And you know, so there's, you know, it's one of them where there's things happening. There's things that are kind of potentially being held up because of the way we traditionally do things. But there may be a point when, you know, some of that friction is just reduced, right? And again, if we kind of even look at it, Tennessee are about, I think they've just passed the law, I think yesterday or the day before, which now allows Web3 companies to come in, operate, set up companies under very different governance structures. And it's only the second sort of state, I think, after Wyoming, who've basically done that as well. And so, you know, there's actually things that are happening on a kind of, you know, state level or government level, you know, in the US, and I think, you know, kind of fast moving sort of, you know, regions like that. And so things are happening, right? And I think this is really where it gets interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I mean, I think the thing is that it's just that element of catch up now, right? That's the thing. It's and look, I think people aren't too late. So I think we should start by saying that first and foremost. You know, we're right at the very beginning of something. So, you know, and depending obviously where you are geographically in the world and how involved you are, you're ahead of others. But this is, you know, still very much the beginning of a journey. And by that, I mean, you know, being swept up in this wave, right? Because obviously there's been ripples in this space for years, right? Blockchain's not new, and kind of some of the stuff that we'll be talking about isn't new. But it's been more of a, you know, a paddle, you know, out paddleboarding perhaps, or stand-up paddleboarding. Now you're definitely on a surfboard and you're kind of riding a wave.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we'll touch on kind of, you know, the differences between, you know, the different sort of iterations of a web. But I think one of the key reasons why this is moving so quickly is the bulk of the technology already exists.
Yes, exactly.
And I think it's, you know, if we go back to sort of, you know, 2007, when social media started to become a little bit more mainstream, people were just building out tech right from scratch. It didn't exist. Whereas I think the foundations of you know, the third iteration is here. Right? It's already there, and that's why it's moving so quickly. But I think, Andrew, before we kind of, I think, start running before we kind of walk. I think very quickly, let's kind of maybe touch on, you know, maybe why Web 3.0 exists, where we've kind of come from. So quick kind of differential between Web 1, Web 2, and now the latest version.
Yeah, so for obviously those of us that are old enough that remember that kind of information superhighway with Web 1. Web 1 was very much, you know, that web presence, right? So building out a website at its core, you know, having some sort of web address, email, etc. That was kind of very much the Web 1 space. You know, as we moved into kind of Web 2, more of, you know, large organizations that essentially kind of leverage the power of Web 1, you know, and we're talking about companies like Google, Facebook, you know, back in the day, MySpace, you know, and some of the other larger kind of social platforms that took the power of the internet and then kind of took ownership of it almost, you know, and then commoditize us as individuals to kind of play in that space. Web 3 is a very dramatic shift away from that. It's a shift where it's ultimately, you know, wanting to be completely decentralized, you know, you taking back control as an individual or as a community, you know, and kind of really playing nice in the sandbox with each other in that community environment. So really very much driven around the creator as an individual, and you choosing how, you know, your own path effectively, not being beholden to, you know, large corporate and kind of bound by their rules, right?
Yeah, it's almost like if you go back and read some of the early I don't know, extracts from Sir Tim Berners-Lee, right? You know, so you know, the founder of the internet, and what he kind of talks about is very much like a very kind of decentralized environment. You know, that this internet is, you know, this open space where people can kind of, you know, publish content, where they ultimately own that content, and it, you know, lives in this kind of different, you know, online virtual world.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, okay, everyone kind of jumped on that and said, this is amazing.
Exactly.
This is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the line, these big tech organizations have come in, said, actually, if we own this and if we own this, then we become.
We all embraced it.
Yeah, and we all loved it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's not.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So we, you know, and I guess almost to an extent, we didn't almost know better.
No.
Right. And some did, because people were like, be careful of these big companies. But I mean, you don't have platforms with billions of people on them, you know, if they haven't obviously done something right.
No, and also today, we'll have conversations today with prospects and clients around still leveraging these still big tech. So I think, you know, that's probably why it's an interesting show today, because we're effectively not attacking, but we're questioning the core of our existence.
Yeah, you know, to some extent, sure, because I think you know, but again, it's
like all about evolution.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the way this has happened is we've kind of gone in one direction, and then there's certain people that have said, actually, this isn't the right direction, and we almost need to go back to basics. Yeah, we need to start owning our own content rather than, you know, our content, what we produce, what we share, doesn't belong to us, and that doesn't. And I mean, irrespective of what you know about the internet and technology, you know, if I say, Andrew, you create something and you want to share it with everyone, but the second you share it,
it's mine.
You no longer
own
it,
yeah.
Right? It's not
or
yours.
I can do what I want with it.
Yeah, and I can do what I want with it. You'll be like, hold on, that's my content. I've just created.
Exactly.
Right? So even from that common sense perspective, we can see that there's challenges there, right? There's something that's not quite right.
Yeah, there's questions that are being raised.
Yeah, right? and it's quite funny because you know, we look at, you know, again, we were talking about things like Facebook groups yesterday, right?
Yeah.
In a very sort of active conversation. And the challenge with even things like Facebook groups is there's almost like a false sense of security. Yeah. Right. In terms of, okay, cool, here's a community that I engage with on a daily basis that lives on Facebook. Yeah. But guess what? I don't own that community. I'm actually not a part of that community, because actually Facebook controls that community. Yes. And tomorrow they can turn around and say, actually, we don't like that community, and switch it off, and that's it, right? Whatever's been built, you know, and sort of, you know, created.
And we saw that in Facebook. I still remember being at the conference in San Diego, the Social Media Examiner World, many years ago, when Facebook changed their algorithm, you know, and I mean, people lost their livelihoods overnight, you know, whereby previously they were posting something that were getting millions of views, you know, hundreds of thousands of engagement. They were running their entire business through Facebook. And just through a couple of tweaks in the algorithm, and this was around the time when they started to, you know, develop the ad platform and pay for play in Facebook. You know, businesses were destroyed. So, you know, this is the challenge: building your business and having a reliance on that. At the end of the day, they're just another organization and a company that quite frankly doesn't care about you. You know, as because what they really care about is the individuals that engage, right, and the individuals that pay. So yeah, I think that this people are kind of waking up to that. People are realizing it. The whole kind of eggs in one basket, you know, these kinds of things. You know, they've got to be careful. I mean, I remember having early conversations with people. It's like, I'm good. I've got an Instagram account. I don't need a website. Yeah. Okay. You know, well, tomorrow you can lose that and everything associated.
And I think we've been preaching that for a while. Yeah. I think we've always tried to make people conscious of that. I mean, ultimately, the only asset you really kind of own online is your website, right? Yeah. But you know, there's definitely been a move in favor of other platforms. Yeah. Because of that reach, because of the audience that's already on there, and all of those elements, you know. And I think Instagram's a really kind of interesting point as well. But I think, you know, again, we'll touch on that. But again, other communities, like well, Instagram and YouTube, for
YouTube,
example, right? Again, you can build, lots of subscribers, post some really interesting content. But if for whatever reason YouTube feel as if some sort of violation's been made, your channel's gone, your subscribers are lost, and where do you kind of go after that, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is what people are like saying, this can't be right. The control and the power that these platforms have. We saw it during the presidential election in the States, right? Where they're saying there's too much social power, on these platforms because they can ultimately, dictate how elections go. And again, it's not because of the content that's being posted by individuals, but it's the way the algorithms are showing people the content that's being posted.
It's an echo chamber.
And like if anyone who has the power to say, hey, this piece of content has more value or is more interesting than that piece of content, so we're going to show this to more users. I mean, ultimately, what you're doing is really, influencing things in perhaps not a great way.
It's interesting. I mean, and you've got other platforms now that have really, risen, like Patreon, for example. I mean, Patreon is a content creator environment. It's a subscription-based environment, and the rules there basically are that you can pretty much do what you want, because people are paying to access your content, and then obviously there's a revenue share associated to that. But it's interesting how I listen to a lot of podcasts, and there's a lot of podcasters that I listen to that I subscribe to their Patreons because there's additional content. You're happy to pay for the content, right? You kind of get, usually, to be honest with you, there's a lot more swearing on those platforms. So you kind of, there's also other businesses that have kind of been born out of this where, the rules are kind of pretty clear, right? Because instead of them having a reliance on almost being like the world's police, YouTube and things like this. And there is a lot of pressure associated to these platforms as well. I mean, we don't pay to use YouTube, we don't pay to do that, but everybody expects them to police the channel, right? But they're beholden to no one at the end of the day. It's so, when you've got these other platforms that are paid, in subscription based, I think that's also an interesting movement out of that as well.
Yeah, I think there's one extra point here that we need to talk about, because I think when we're talking about that, the centralization piece, I think we've also got to definitely kind of address the fact that, again, Web 3.0 isn't just targeting social media platforms.
No.
I think the whole point is, and this all came out of sort of 08, 09, really when kind of the ideas around Bitcoin were kind of floated, because what people looked at is, the world economy kind of crashed. I don't know if we're heading in a similar direction right now, but certainly what everyone realized is that no organization is, too big to fail.
Yeah.
Governments aren't too big to fail. And that was where people started saying, hold on, we've got all of this kind of centralized power and influence.
Yeah.
That's sitting within, governments, within, organizations. And this is the challenge, right? This is a challenge to basically what we know, what we believe in. And again, some of these centralized systems are very archaic, right? So if we look at, typical kind of banking infrastructures and stuff like that, these systems are, I think this version of a banking system that we kind of all operate on is maybe 60, 70 years old. And you think how much the world has moved on during that time. Is this the right way of doing things, right? And I think this is where, this is the whole movement does encompass, sort of, control by governments, control of currencies, and then even on a kind of, slightly lower level, control of organizations.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's very much a part of it. And I don't think we'll have too much time to kind of talk about that. But
no, that's on our other show, the Conspiracy Hour. The me and Eric wear tinfoil hats.
Not this kind of. But the things like decentralized autonomous organizations, like DAOs. If you guys aren't familiar with those, you'll be 100% familiar with those in the next couple of years, because again, that's now taking on how companies and organizations should be structured from an ownership level, from a governance perspective. And it's all, again, driven by transparency, with every kind of transaction decision recorded on a blockchain, so it's open for everyone to see. and if you kind of start to get your head around that, it starts to make a lot of sense. You just, I think there's a whole lot of, there's a whole community of millions and millions of people out there who want to make the world a better place. And it sounds as fluffy as hell and not typically something that we'd ever say on the show. But ultimately, that's what it is. It's about inclusion. It's about tackling all of the social issues that people are facing. How do you have more equality? How do you have more equality across the world? How do you make the world a more transparent place? These are all absolute, almost like fundamental ideologies for a better world, right? And that's why it's gaining traction.
Yeah, and I think also there's an opportunity to make real change. That's the big difference, right? So, in the sense before, there was a lot of words associated to this, but it was a challenge to, pull certain communities together, or distribute wealth, or whatever the case may be. But now, obviously, there's it's happening, right? We've seen, and we've spoken about it on this show, about some of the incredible things that DAOs have been built out for kind of Ukraine relief, and some phenomenal kind of charity work in this space at the moment. So it's happening now, right? I think that's the thing. There's now, as you said, much like the vehicle of Web3 and why it's moving so fast is because the tech is there. The movement of this kind of decentralized environment is also in that space as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to touch back again on Twitter, Andrew, before we kind of move on. So we kind of spoke about the challenges of platforms that Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and so on. But Twitter at the moment is really making a very different move, right? And I want to kind of maybe talk about that, because this is live, right? This is stuff that's kind of happening right now. You mentioned earlier that you're spending a lot more time on Twitter than you have done maybe over the last few years. I certainly have as well. There's a community of people in this space that are on Twitter, but why is Twitter almost not treated in the same way as a Facebook, for example? What's your kind of thinking behind that?
I think the thing is that first and foremost, I should say I'm just getting back into that space. So the reason I'm getting back into that space is mainly around the things that are of interest to me at the moment, and those conversations tend to either ignite on Twitter or kind of live there and kind of live and breathe in that space. I think what's interesting is, especially with when we mentioned it at the top here with Musk, getting involved and taking ownership of that now, he's already blowing it apart in a sense. Look, he wants the algorithm out there. So he wants everyone to understand how the algorithm works. He wants to remove the bots. So it's a very real environment, as opposed to, a dummy, data-driven environment. He wants to, open up the platform to allow, people to kind of work with the platform, right? So not have this walled garden, to a certain extent, what it is now, and I think the movement in that direction is definitely an interesting one, right? Because it's almost completely opposite to the other social platforms that are very, closed in that sense, right?
Yeah, because I think for challenges and there's a potential kind of legal connotations with some of the other platforms, is that data is there, everything.
Yes. Yeah.
So if they, I think one of the challenges of all the centralization piece when it comes to these kinds of companies is their revenues are focused on ads.
That's right.
Ads, right?
Yeah.
So, they make their money through serving ads, and pretty much that's it. Right.
Yeah.
And so if they lose their ability to serve ads, which is maybe kind of opening up their data and their algorithms and things like that, they are potentially threatening their very existence. Right. Yeah. And so I think the Twitter move is really interesting. And I think also the foundations of Twitter were actually much more kind of almost decentralized. So when it was launched, Twitter wanted to be that, that open platform, the one that wanted developers to go on there and start to sort of, build on Twitter, make it a better place. And Twitter wanted to previously, connect other social media platforms, to Twitter, right? So you'd have, maybe, potentially Facebook data coming into you. And I think for obvious reasons that never happened. But what's happening right now, is that Twitter now is very much kind of, no, we should be a fully decentralized organization. Algorithms should be open. And, people should be able to, get those developers back into our community, build on it. They've got links now with crypto. People are changing their Twitter handles to their Ethereum and Bitcoin domains. And there's so much going on there, right? I think that,
How do you think that works, though? Obviously, what Musk is saying is that he's going to take it private again.
But that's why it works.
Yeah, because in a public domain, you can't make these decisions, right? And that again shakes the fundamentals of that IPOs, right? And kind of why do people do that and move in that space? And be interesting.
The main reason, we can just break it down and say, once Musk owns it, he doesn't have to go out to the public say that actually our ad revenue is down 50%.
Exactly.
And then literally again, see what happens with his stock price. He's got look
at Facebook.
He'll have investors to deal with, but not kind of shareholders in the public sense.
And famously, crypto investors. Right. I mean, 100 million, right? And so a serious amount, pulling that money together, it's just not out of his back pocket.
Exactly. And this is, and actually what Twitter have got is a 2-year plan to double the size of the platform and the revenue. And I think what Twitter has right now is the opportunity to have alternative revenue streams, which I think the other platforms don't have right now. Again, so they're all focused very much on ad revenue, whereas I don't feel as if Twitter has to focus on it. There's a lot more going for the platform where they can say, okay, well, ad revenue is potentially there if people want to kind of still promote stuff, but actually because of our work in crypto and the communities that we have here, there's potential other kind of revenue models. So, and I think that's what will be explored now, because they'll have the luxury of being able to explore it.
Exactly.
Again, it's not a public entity now.
Just want to jump in, guys. The reason I'm leaning forward is we're getting a few questions coming in from you guys, and we should have said at the top, by all means, jump in the chat, jump in the Q&A. When we remember we've got kind of people asking questions, we've got I think Narissa in London asking, do we think that Web3 is actually here? Because we hear a lot about Web3, and do we actually think that it's here at the moment? Like, what's our opinion on that?
I think it is, or it's certainly well on its way to be. But again, it's early.
Yeah, but in my mind, the reason I'm kind of asking that question now is that I feel like Twitter, this transformation as Twitter, is one of those kind of key building blocks, right? Because I think the other thing that Twitter brings to the party is almost like one, it's validation, but then also just the sheer size of Twitter and the user base, and go through these changes, you immediately start to have conversations with people that are blissfully unaware at the moment, right? They're arguing over politics and not on Twitter, and not kind of being involved in the community space, right?
But look, I think it will. The point is, there's still a lot of education that needs to still needs to
happen. Definitely.
Again, I think that's something that we'll touch upon.
Yeah, so look, it's a reason, guys. It's a reason that we've spun off another show. We've done a Web3 Digest show that will be launched this week. So, I mean, one of the reasons we've done that is because this warrants kind of more up to date conversations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think thank you. First, I think also Narissa, good job, right? 7:30.
Early doors. Well done. Thanks well done. Yeah.
And apologies to everyone else who's watching from elsewhere. This is kind of a perfect time for the night. We look. I think the sort of moving on from we're talking about Twitter and stuff like that, is there's also a shift in the crypto space, in the online space, to anonymity, right? In terms of again, I think everyone in that space who's kind of seen, how they've been potentially monetized or have been monetized by, the Facebooks and the other kind of social platforms. I think, again, being a lot more kind of anonymous for good reason or for bad reason. I think, the challenge with, being anonymous is sometimes you don't know what those reasons are, right? But I feel as if, like, again, when we're looking at things like digital wallets, I mean, a lot of that's designed to protect us. If someone knows who you are, you become easier to target.
That's right.
And so there's definitely security aspects there. but again, I'm seeing some interesting things again within this community, actually on a local level, where a local NFT project, for example, which is launched by the Habtor family or a member of Habtor family, at least, which is focusing on sort of hospitality and things like that.
Yeah.
Where they've been building a booking engine which actually gives you the option to book a hotel room book a hotel room anonymously, right? And it's it's literally a toggle button.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, would you like to book a hotel room? This is what the cost is. Yes. Enter your details or book anonymously. And again, me and you kind of spoke about this, saying, well, that's super interesting, right? Because again, if there are people that want to book hotel rooms anonymously, don't want their information out there, are very kind of protective of whatever personal things they've got going on, that's fair. But there's also potential legal implications for that, right?
I don't know how it works.
Well, yeah, I think
I'll be the elephant in the room. I don't know how it works. I don't know. I mean, look, obviously we now know, travel has changed and you don't have to necessarily go to reception to, check into your hotel. You can use your phone and, everything else associated to that. And you can pretty much have non-human contact. But I think there's still some legal implications.
Still some ID that needs to get
look, here for sure, in this part of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, they want to know your inside trouser leg, measurement before they give you a hotel room. So, I mean, and they won't, there's even stories this last week here of, having digital copies of ID and, hotels going, no, I need an actual card. So, yeah.
I think, we both said, okay, look, short term.
Yeah, it's smart though,
right?
Super smart. Yeah.
But the point is that if people are thinking along these lines, that means that somewhere along the line, this might become something that's very real.
It's interesting. I think also as well, there is a big difference between, like publicly creating content and publicly pushing yourself out and having that, persona, whatever that persona is. If you look at some of, Logan Paul or Mr. Beast and some of these big YouTube and social influencers that were, but versus, what they're up to, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's also, I think that may be an interesting shift because it's almost like this rise of those creators. There's always been a pressure to completely keep everything public, almost like to that celebrity point. So I think it'd be interesting how that whole, part of our society and community kind of builds out their piece as well. That ability to anonymize themselves is interesting.
Yeah. But I think, taking all this into consideration, I think let's kind of really tackle that hard question. I think and I guess that question is, so how does all of this really kind of threaten digital marketing, right? So how does, all of these different things that we've spoken about, where people's mindsets are, the lack of sort of centralization being a big sort of objective, people wanting to remain more kind of anonymous. What is that kind of impact in our space, right? In that digital marketing space, especially for brands, I guess, for people that are very kind of used to, being reliant on digital platforms to reach their audiences.
I think it's two key things. First and foremost is that data piece, as you mentioned. The data element associated to what people are doing, where they are, who they are, the ability to target individuals based on certain set personas, is one thing, right? Yeah. So having access to data around individuals allows brands, companies, organizations to target them, and ultimately all of the time at the moment, and that's the kind of second word that I'm going to lean into, but all of the time at the moment is spent, in that environment where you're tracked, right? And you give up certain amounts of data in return for use of services. I think that not so much in the Middle East or I don't think Asia, but Europe and the States especially, there's been a movement, for like blocking ads and ad tracking. And obviously we've seen, I think a big indicator of anonymizing yourself and a challenge we've seen firsthand is with Apple, basically kind of giving you the option, hey, listen, do you want this app to track you across your device, right? And there's only still a 4% uptake of people saying yes. And that's directly impacted Facebook, bottom line, right? As far as how we can track. So I think, that data piece is being threatened anyway.
Yeah.
Also with the new cookie kind of policy update, and these are things that are being threatened. So, there's a movement almost in our space of like that customer data platforms, and where you have ownership of customer data, but then if the customers and clients themselves are trying to anonymize themselves, what next, right? What? So I think data is the first.
Yeah, I think 100%. I think, but I think there's a couple of points. I think firstly, platforms like Apple, why they allowed that in the first place on a native platform that they've developed is another question, right?
Yes, true.
Right. So the fact they've almost done a U-turn, but haven't called it a U-turn.
No.
Saying, hey,
we're looking after you.
Yeah, we're going to give you more control.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, actually, why did you give the control away in the first place?
That's right.
The second thing is yeah, you're right. I mean, all of the data. If we look at, we keep picking on Facebook, but it's so easy to pick on. The challenge is, how much information does Facebook know about you? And the reality is, it's much more than what we could even imagine, right? And we left the States with these new Oculus,
even more now,
right? The Oculus devices and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I was chatting to someone saying, I'm blown away by Oculus and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he was like, cool. So now Facebook not only know everything about you as a person, what you like, what you're interested in, what you read, what you don't read. Yeah. They now know the size of your house.
That's right.
They
know your front room. They know your desk. They know.
Exactly right. All of these other things that they didn't know, they now know.
Yeah.
And that's why that product is highly subsidized, right? Yeah. It's very cost effective to buy one of these devices, and you're thinking, wow, this is great. It costs a fraction of the price of an iPhone.
It's cheaper than an iPad. It's cheaper than an iPad.
Well, exactly. It's a third. It's a third of the price of an iPad.
I know. Yeah.
So you kind of look at it, and then now you understand it. Yeah. Well, this is just another way of capturing more data. But the point is, I think all of that data was really focused around sort of demographic behavior or demographic information. Emails, right? Emails have been sort of commoditized and monetized, throughout the life of the internet. Mobile numbers and all of those aspects, right? And if you kind of look at it, and actually this was quite funny, because I think it was a session at South by where somebody said, we kind of look at, all of these social media platforms, right? They kind of all call their members users.
Yeah.
It's like there's only one other industry that calls their customers users, right? And that's the drug industry.
Amazing.
Right?
Patience.
But it's true, right? I mean, who else calls their customers users apart from social media companies and drug dealers, basically, is what they say. And it's really interesting, because the point is because of all of this information, and because people are becoming more and more aware that they're being targeted. We had conversations at my house the other week. My wife puts on her computer, and literally she's seeing ads for the things that we'd spoken about, right? Yeah. So much of that stuff is happening, and we start to think, okay, look, this is now kind of spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
And again, I think the other sort of challenge, I think data was definitely one. I think I jumped in, actually. You said there was two, right? What was the second one?
No, time.
Time, right.
Yeah, because I mean, I think the thing is, these platforms, they live on our time.
Yeah.
So, if I'm not spending time on Instagram or Snap or TikTok, the advertisers and the brands that are on there, the core, the revenue is generated. As soon as you lose that watch time, the time spent on device, whatever the case may be, you start to lose the game, right? And I think it goes back to what you and I, if we look at screen time, it's Discord and it's Twitter.
Yeah, I think we'll jump back into that. Yeah. I think you're right.
Versus some, other stuff. Yeah.
And I think this is the point. I think the Discord and Twitter piece, I think, is, again, those platforms are gaining more prominence again now because of the trust issues with the other platforms.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really kind of where it is. So some of the kind of breakaway platforms in this space right now, where I think like what you rightly said, where eyeballs are now going and where time is being spent, are platforms like Discord. I think to a lesser extent, Telegram.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But Discord, I think certainly, and there's a lot of people spending hours and hours and hours a day, on those kinds of platforms.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Discord really, when you look at it, is a centralized platform.
Yeah.
But they're not they're not basically generating revenue through ads and by selling personal data and all of that kind of stuff.
No.
And it's like the kind of what Twitter want to do, which is open up the platform and allow people to kind of build on it. You know, this is something that's kind of happening on Discord already. So, you know, there's definitely a reason for people to spend time on those platforms.
Yeah.
But I think the core reason why is because there's communities of like-minded people on that. But I think we should probably go into that in a little bit more detail, right?
The community aspect.
Yeah, of things like this.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is this is the other. Yeah, you know, this is the other challenge that presents itself on this. I mean, the platforms are reliant on, you know, directing you towards an ad or kind of pushing you towards a product or service. Whereas now, I mean, a lot of the, let's say, projects that we're hearing about or interesting, you know, kind of companies, right? We've got to talk about that. You know, I think that we're finding that through communities. We're finding it from recommendations and referrals. And as we know, you know, the referral part of business is like holy grail, right? I mean, to have your business, your brand, your service recommended by someone else, you know, is gold, right? And I think that also is interesting, right? Now potentially, obviously, we haven't really spoken about the danger of that. There is potentially a danger of, you know, someone potentially hijacking a community and trying to infiltrate but I think at the moment it's a pretty clean environment. But you know, and again, back to that policing point, people usually spot things that are abnormal and they jump in. But I think that community aspect is really interesting because you know, what we've seen. I mean, what's very what's incredible about this kind of Web3 movement is really the inclusivity. You know, and every single person you talk to that knows more than you, first and foremost says, look, listen, I know only this much, right? More than you. It's kind of it's a very you know, inclusive community in that sense, and I think that that referral piece is huge, right? Being engaged in a community, and it's not just you know, like an echo chamber of bouncing off, you know, I think this, oh yeah, I agree, or I think this, I agree. There's kind of real different individuals, different classes, you know, different individuals, very different people. You know, and that again is of interest, right? You know, it's not like a you know, like a bros club or anything like that. It's very much kind of diverse and kind of, I think that's what's great about it.
Yeah, I think there's a level of accountability on some of these communities as well. I think we've all been sort of ingrained and trained to know the difference between posting something that's right and posting something that's wrong. You know, that sort of cultural sensitivity and all of those elements, I think is sort of ingrained in most of us now. What's happening, and I think the communities that we're sort of engaging in on these platforms.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I guess, you know, I mean, even if we go back, say 4 months or 5 months, like Discord obviously isn't a new platform, right? It's been used by gamers and it's been used by kids.
Yes.
Right, for a long time. The you know, it's only when we started to sort of get more ingrained within this space, where people were saying, actually, we've got a Discord server, and if you come onto our Discord server, you'll see much more information about what we're trying to do.
That's right.
You know, what we're trying to achieve. You'll get to kind of engage with the community.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you almost end up, you know, with I don't know, for want of a better way of putting it, I guess, like an old school chat room, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
with different kind of rooms and different.
I'm going to let you describe this, just why I get a charger.
Okay, amazing. So you know, so we've just got the ability to, you know, join these communities. These communities need some sort of verification.
Chris, can I have your charger, please?
They limit bots and how bots can basically engage, you know, in a kind of false way, you know, to kind of avoid some of the challenges that Twitter's had in the past. And in doing so, what we have is been very kind of inclusive communities, different topics within these communities, and all of that is really what's driving this. Excellent work, Andrew.
I'll explain why to the guys. We have a new camera, and this particular camera seems to like drinking juice from the Mac. So My apologies for that, Amit, but I think you were walking through.
Yeah, so I think the point here is that, you know, we've got to look at it in terms of, okay, look, you know, the kind of threats, you know, and I think the major kind of threats to digital marketing, I think, like what you said, is obviously, you know, if suddenly there's less data out there, how do we kind of target consumers? How do we target customers?
Exactly.
Eyeballs, like I said, you know, a lot of these communities that we're in have a lot of people who are millennials, Gen Z.
Yes.
Right. So really, this is that future source of kind of, you know, disposable income. The guys that, you know, will invest in brands and
that's right,
and buy products, buy services, all that kind of stuff. And these guys, I mean, if, you know, in these communities, for example, no one mentions Facebook. No one says, hey, come and check my LinkedIn out. No one's looking at saying, hey, come out and check these. The only time I've seen anyone refer to Instagram, and again, we're talking about communities of hundreds of thousands of people, not, you know, a few friends on a call. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, is just for local Dubai Habitat one where they've said, hey, check out our Instagram. It's just not part of the equation. So it's not front of mind. People aren't going onto these platforms. And I think you really kind of touched on it in a way where at time, if people are spending more and more time on these alternative platforms, you know, really feeling part of the community, really kind of focusing on, you know, personal development, understanding more, educating each other, all of those different elements. How much time is then being spent on these alternative platforms? Because we've got 24 hours a day and we've got to sleep, eat and drink during that time.
And look, I think, and we're going to touch upon this because we literally have about 6 minutes left or close to that. And this warrants a whole other show. And I think we'll take a deeper dive into kind of that NFT space. But the amount of, you know, brand love associated to some of these projects is phenomenal as well. So, you know, you've got a group of individuals that have invested, usually around the NFT space. But on the back of that, other projects have been launched, and instantly you've seen, you know, phenomenal brand love and uptake, right? So, you know, just because you have built out that community, and it's a strong bonded community, and it's very active, it's very engaging. Anything, you know, you kind of turn to, it kind of spins off. I mean, interestingly, you know, kind of going back to Mr. Beast, I find him fascinating as a kind of content creator. But if you look at, you know, he has leveraged his community on the back of, he's just launched chocolate called Feastables, right? And he famously launched Mr. Beast Burgers, and he launched in like 400 locations overnight, right? Through dark kitchens. But he's leveraged his community. And I think what's interesting now is because these communities in Web3 are so active, almost not from day one, but if you build it right, you've got, you know, a servable or addressable market that's willing to invest in your brand, products and services, right? From day one. And then also, oh, guess what? Tell other people about it, right? You know, and kind of refer it in as well. You know, and that again is a bit of a challenge because some of these communities are closed as well. So I gain certain access to these communities, they're closed, and again that almost, you know, becomes a tantalizing you know, thing as well. It's, oh yeah, I want to be part of that, I want to be part of this, you know, and there's a buzz and excitement and a whole load of other things associated to it.
I think so. And look, I think again, it's still very young. So again, these communities are already building, they're forming. I think for brands who want to kind of really be a part of this, it's quite interesting. And I didn't realize, but I think it was Visa who bought a Bored Ape NFT. Okay. And I don't know what kind of red tape they must have had to go through. So they spent $150,000 on buying a Bored Ape NFT. Great investment now. I think it's still about sort of, you know, double that. But the point is, they had to spend that money because they wanted to understand the community. Right. They wanted to understand what was going on.
Exactly.
What people were talking about, where those interests are, because they know that the future of their business ultimately relies on, you know, millennials and Gen Zs hopefully doing the same as what you know, our generations and older have done, right? And if we don't do that, and if they don't do that, then, you know, real kind of big powerhouses like Visa, for example, face challenges. And I think you know, so I think, you know, we've got to look at things like, you know, understanding your way where, from a digital marketing perspective, we're not reliant on emails, we're not reliant on third-party data and cookies and things like that, right? It's all very much about how do you build your own communities?
Yeah.
How do you kind of engage them? How do you kind of build sort of brand love? So Andrew mentioned, obviously some of the communities that are really kind of, really kind of loyal and fiercely loyal to communities that have only existed for the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, look at things like, building your own Web3 projects. Like, again, even if it's not something that you're ready to launch, start to understand why you'd want to do that. For example, we're speaking to a number of brands right now about NFT projects, right?
Yeah.
And the main kind of reason behind it is not because they want to kind of issue some nice artwork out there for the community. It's about understanding that actually, if people are holding our NFTs, are these our loyal customers who want these NFTs because they really value and love our brand, and they want to feel a part of our community. I think this is what it's all about, right? I think just to summarize it in those last 4 minutes.
Totally.
But really, this is where, just getting that mindset, right? And it's not, everything we're speaking about today, Facebook's still going to be around, a few years from now, right? For sure. But the point is some of those opportunities in terms of, how we kind of market and advertise today, and where we're spending that digital marketing budget is just going to have to be spent elsewhere, because it's just going to get harder and harder to potentially reach target audiences, right?
Totally.
And I think that's where this really kind of comes into play.
Yeah, and it's going to be a huge shift, because as Amit mentioned, one of the things that is in this space is, as much as you can anonymize yourself, everything that you actually do is registered, from down to spending on. I think what's interesting is kind of going back to one of the projects, Doodles. They put their message out to the DAO. Hey, listen, we want to go south by. How much we want to spend? This is how much we spend. Everything's public ledger. There's no brown envelopes, backhanders. There's no kickbacks. There's no rebates. This is all there. It's public knowledge, which is quite interesting.
But I think you're right. And I think the that transparency piece is obviously very key. But I think just maybe the final kind of words. We're at that on the hour mark now. But I think me and you both have spoken to, I think, a handful of clients about this. Certainly kind of friends. But there's only one real way of understanding the opportunities in this space, and that's for you to be in this space. So I guess, whether it's kind of, going out and setting up your own wallet if you don't already have one, to going out and looking at platforms like OpenSea, and going on Twitter, right? And if you see, or hear of interesting sort of NFT communities, and you want to kind of understand more, go onto Twitter, because they'll be on there. There'll be a whole load of community information on there. There'll be links to Discords. There'll be all that kind of stuff.
Look, let's remember, Twitter still operates on hashtags. So literally jump on Twitter, search the hashtag Web3, search hashtag NFTs. You'll be able to jump into a conversation pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the real kind of takeaway is that, right? Just go away, spend a little bit of time. If hopefully what we've said has made any sense over the last hour, I think at that next step, if you're not already in the space, is to really kind of go and explore it and spend a bit of time in it. I think you'll start to kind of see very quickly, what's happening, right?
Yeah, definitely. Look, guys, we appreciate you spending the time with us this morning. Obviously, this is a subject at the moment that Amit and I can pretty much talk about for the next 6 hours, but we've all got to get on with our days, and we appreciate you guys being on today. See some new faces as well as some kind of familiar faces on there, or names as it were, who have been watching. So sorry for the kind of camera angle, but this is all trying to get better equipment for us, but it just happens to drain a lot of batteries. So thank you for your time this morning. We'll be back next week, kind of talking about anything associated to growth. And as I said, we're going to be launching our Web3 Digest show as well, which is like a 15-minute show and podcast again. So if you've listened to this, thank you. If you've watched this, thank you. And by all means reach out to myself and Amit, so you can still tweet us, or you can jump on LinkedIn as well and kind of jump us on there, right?
Yep.
Good stuff. All right, excellent. Thanks, guys. Cheers. Thanks, Amit.